Okay, so we have a short agenda. Let's see if we get through this. Um, Starts with, we do the roll.
Yes. Vice Mayor Moritas.
Here.
Commissioner Glassman.
Here.
Commissioner McKenzie is excused.
Commissioner McKenzie would not be here. He has a personal family.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Here.
Mayor Trentell.
Here. Moving on to R1. This is a resolution waiving the mandatory commission approval amount and the competitive solicitation and selection process contained in the City of Fort Lauderdale procurement for procuring a Rio Vista Parks improvements, including final installation and inspection of new playground equipment, artificial turf, and additional necessary milling and paving on Ponce de Leon Drive, Southeast 11th Street, and Southeast Avenue. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes. Yeah, let me see if I can tell the story once, and it really pertains to both of the agenda items today, and take your questions and hopefully move forward. Again, I do apologize for bringing you in on your summer recess, but I do appreciate that you're here.
We're in flip-flops.
So if I take you back in time, today resides around two parks in the Rio Vista neighborhood. If I take you back in time, we had some stormwater work that was approved near Hector Park and Virginia S. Young Park in that neighborhood, and we had a contract with continuing contractor. Contractor was Hinterland to do stormwater work in that area. Fast forward a little bit before that work got done, we had sewer pipe break in Rio Vista one was adjacent to Hector Park, one was adjacent to Virginia S. Young Park, and we essentially stopped the stormwater work and used those parks as construction areas for the pipe project that became setup areas for the pipe contractor. When the pipe got finished, which as you recall happened some time ago now in that part of the city, we started restoration of those two parks to bring them back online as parks back online, the way they were when we unfortunately suffered the breaks in the sewer pipe. For whatever reason, and I don't have the exact answer for you today, although I can tell you that our chief procurement officer did sign off on the purchase to move forward with using the Hinterland company to do the park restoration. I identified at one point when a change order came across my desk for the Hinterland contract at a value that I don't have the administrative authority to approve, that we needed to look into it further and figure out what was going on. What we discovered was that this contract probably was not appropriately used for park restoration. It was park restoration not within the scope of what that contract was intended for. It was intended for stormwater work. And so we'll figure out exactly why that sign-off happened at some point. But resulting, after we looked into this, was that we really just don't believe we have a contract, and two, don't believe that we have funding in place to finish the project. If you've been in the neighborhood, what you would find is that the road has not been repaved, the sidewalk is not finished, the swales are not done, there's not harmonization between the pavement and the sidewalk driveways, and a place that still needs to be final punch list installed. There is still some work to do over there. We looked at all the options that I have as a manager to either administratively approve or piggyback on contracts, etc. And between the city attorney, the city auditor, and I, we've just not been able to locate any path forward that conforms with our policy, other than to bring before the commission the request that we waive those procurement rules for the purposes of rehabilitation of these two parks. Allow me to hire one or more contractors as is needed, finish the parks, and again, that would be a finish of the playground, road paving, sidewalk, curb, swale, and harmonization. It would likely be two contracts, one that does all that work, the other that installs the balance of the play set, because it has to be installed by the manufacturer. The only way I can think of to move forward is to say that we just, in this one circumstance, we need to waive the procurement rules, enter into these contracts, get the project done, and get out of the neighborhood. I've asked the auditor to take an independent look into how this contract was administered. So at some point, that's why I mentioned we will know answers to questions that I don't have today. We'll know in the future. Doug, speak to that if you want. I believe we're going to bring somebody in from the outside to do an audit of this particular contract spend. So we'll do our best we can today to answer questions that you have, but know that there will be further answers coming that I won't say. But I also feel as though it's important we get that project finished, get out. It does represent somewhat a safety issue. Through there, you've seen that the roads great shape. Sidewalks aren't in shape. And candidly, we've been impactful on that neighborhood now the balance of the year, and I think we owe it to the neighborhood project finished. Out of so I'm happy to take questions. I've got staff assembled and potentially answers that I don't have. Offer anything at this point by way of what you're doing.
Sure, thank you. So again, this came to our attention a couple of weeks back. We deferred it for further analysis. Again, we've had discussions between myself, Chris, and Alan regarding this. It was clear from the discussions that there was no way we could move forward with the contractor in the method that we were using them in the past. So we basically had to stop, figure out an appropriate method for moving forward. I think collectively we all agree this is really the only way to do it. There's no other way to utilize the existing contractors mobilized and out there to do the work under the contract. So we simply have to find another way to get the job done. The only two alternatives would be one you have before you, or we go out to bid, which is going to create an enormous delay in terms of time and impact on the neighborhood. And to speak to the other issue, yes, as Chris has said, he came and approached me when this was coming up, recognizing that we need to go back, have a very clear understanding of just what internal controls failed, how that happened. And so we are in the process of retaining an outside firm. I think it's important that we do that with a firm with construction expertise. We're using the same one that's done the audit work out at the beach for the parking garage and the aquatic center, Plaza Park. We're going to do an extension of the contract that we currently have in place with them. That will be coming back. Actually, I take that back. I don't think that will be. I'll have to check with procurement. We're working through the issues on that. Matter of fact, we're having conversations with them today as to whether that's an item that you need to approve or if it's just a change order that we can do at the staff. So we've identified funding for that, and they will go back and conduct what is essentially a forensic audit. Back determine how something.
Okay, so understanding you correctly, then Hinterland was city to take try to prevent flooding.
Correct.
And that was the only thing for which they were hired to do.
That was correct.
Then our procurement signed off variation on that original assignment.
To move forward and do stormwater work, but also do park renovation. And that's the part that was outside of the scope.
And that change was to allow them to do the playground equipment.
Do the playground equipment and artificial turf surface. It was well beyond what authority they had under a storm.
Vice Mayor.
You, Mayor, I do. Well, I do support finishing this project as possible. That is my thoughts on that. So I understand we had two contracts, one stormwater, and we had sewer contract, and about the same. Do we have anything in the sewer contract for fixing the playground and the
I don't believe so. And if that sewer contract was very untraditional as well, because it was done on an emergency basis, we had massive force main break. So it was more pipe.
So, I mean, I even remember at Holiday Park seeing all the pipe sitting right there off the federal highway. So should we, or are we moving forward, including mitigation areas or there's damage? I know that playground I had sewer and water. Oh, maybe both. Maybe it was flooding and then we added.
Those parks were just really, we fenced them off and they.
So that it was park. So, it was
So to her question then was stormwater mitigation inclusive of redoing streets, sidewalks?
Stormwater. So
Or is that because the streets and the sidewalks were impacted by the sewer reconstruction, not originally contemplated by the stormwater?
correct. There was an original scope of work for stormwater. That stormwater work did not match up with what they all.
Okay, so the work for the street sidewalk had nothing to do with stormwater.
That was not a part of the original project that I.
think that's what,
Yeah, well, that's what I'm asking too, but then I'm thinking about the sewer project, thinking going back, like, should we have included some funding to redo the playground, or we didn't really need to redo it at that level? Is
So
that what's happening?
We had funding to park renovation. We have spent through it. Project.
Okay, so we needed, the project needed the cost that we had initial budget for.
Correct. If you waive the procurement today, what I'm asking for in the next agenda item is appropriation cost not to exceed $50,000.
So we're doing that now, but what we initially had budgeted was some mitigation to put the playground back in the condition it was.
We had dollars to.
Okay, so we just
remediate.
exceeded that.
Correct.
Well, it's not just exceeding funding, it's exceeding scope. Because
So-
there was a considerable amount of work that was done as well that was not approved. Not just
So-
from the original task order, but the proposed change for. So it wasn't just a matter of funding, it's a matter of scope as well.
So, well, thank you for clarifying that we did have some money set aside. My mind into this playground. We're going to fix it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes, and the example you gave at Holiday Park, if by allowing that property to be used, and I think that's actually the property that has a ground lease with YMCA, they will bring it back to a condition that looked like what it looked like before they were there. So they'll typically come in and either see sod, level, and when they finally take the construction fence down, it will look kind of like what we do post hurricane, where we pile all that field, tear it up, come back.
That's a good point. If we're paying for that, then we may want to make sure it coincides with the YMCA. Maybe we don't reside, and that's another conversation. They're going to that later. Okay, so we're at the point now where we have to authorize more money. Now I'm thinking, where's the money coming? Sewer.
No, the only way that I feel comfortable even making this recommendation that we go forward, have completely transparent, is that the recommendation is a general fund. They're, rather than having restricted funds that I then have to start to calculate, it's complicated. I think the cleanest way to get from here to finish the program.
So when we receive funding from the American Rescue, federal funding, go into,
Some did.
so there's possible some of that money, so some of it was earmarked. Some of that good.
Yeah, I mean, so if you recall, what we did is we did the revenue replacement formula calculation of those funds,
Okay.
and those were less restricted. They're going forward, balance, a small number. But a general fund, honestly, if it's right pocket, left pocket, if the general fund is fund, could have that funding source, could have ad valorem.
Right, but I think it seems like our ad valorem funding source is limited in terms of the extra is available.
Right. I'm asking the commission allow me to use general fund balance. To take.
So in part,
Presumably, there was about $331,000 that was transferred back in budget amendment June of or July of 2020 that the city commission approved that was going to Public Works to do that. However, the $1.7 million task order that the city manager was referring to, we don't know at this point whether that money was used because, frankly, the playground equipment, for example, it's there, but we didn't actually purchase it. I believe the contractor may have, and I don't know what's been paid towards that or what has been paid towards that and what monies were used. So to the extent there was money set aside, we still don't know forensically what.
we'll figure
necessarily
that
happened
out
to that.
later, but moving forward, could we use some of the park fund it?
say it again?
Use park fund?
Yeah, I understand. But that's another squirrely thing.
Yeah, well, I mean,
You
it's a
don't
lot of
know-
money just to pull out of the general fund. That's why I'm just wondering what other
It's
sources.
something we can
are.
certainly look into, but today I wouldn't commit any sort of funds or anything like that in that regard without knowing everything that happened.
My
Right, well,
concern with there would be the expansion or enhancement component of park bond fund, because what we're really doing is restoring two parks that exist as park. And they only stopped existing as parks because our
Well, you're asking us today to vote on funding with us, the funding.
Correct.
That's why
There's additional
wondering about the funding.
work that, although is related to the park project, there was street work done, sidewalk work done adjoining private properties. So there are things that may not fit at all
Park fund.
within that. So it's going to have to.
Okay, so my last question, then I'm sorry. Last question is, will this impact our budget? We already kind of went over the budget, at least in a theoretically.
no, this will impact this current fiscal year as a that's
Not our proposed budget moving forward.
correct.
Okay, great, thank you. Commissioner Glass.
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a few questions, Chris, but before I just wanted to ask John, because John gave us a little brief explanation of the audit. What will that forensic audit actually include? What are all the elements in that audit?
So the first thing we're going to look at is the trail of approvals going back to the inception of this additional work. So we need to understand who authorized it, who was involved at the staff level in terms of identifying the funding, identifying that was the contractor to use. So these are all the internal controls from a procurement perspective that are supposed to be in place to prevent or detect this in a timely manner, and they failed because this goes back to, if I remember correctly, November of last, and it's just come to our attention within the last month or so, at least as far as my understanding. So the internal control environment did not function as it was designed, intended. So clearly it had to have been overridden, and we need to understand who overrode it, at what direction, and what capacity. The contractor should have known not to undertake this without an approved change order. They went forward without it. It's a problem. Staff should have known not to move forward with this, and they did. Problem. So we need to determine very clearly at what level and why.
The contractor will be asked all those questions as well as staff.
Mhm.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So, Chris, why are we here just 12 days before the commission was supposed to come back? What is the sense of urgency that we're here when we're our meeting for our first day back? August 7th?
It's just that right now we've got a pretty torn up neighborhood, and I do have some concern that to just have a contractor leave, which is what we asked them to do, that we would have, we've got pavers that are stacked in piles, we've got metal plates over driveways providing access into homes. I was concerned that the quicker we got moving on the repair, the quicker we would eliminate a safety concern.
So when, let's say we do approve the $750,000, will Hinterland actually be doing all of this work that you've laid out in terms of punch list and everything else that has to happen in terms of safety and street conditions?
I will review our available contracts that we have, and I'll search out for a contractor that can begin almost immediately. So I can't say yes, I can't say no, but really the important thing I'm looking for at this point is a contractor that has bandwidth to get the work done quickly, well, professionally, and can get off the site. My guess is it will probably be a company other than Hinterland.
Other than Hinterland. Do we owe Hinterland any monies?
We'll learn that one day. Alan and I have talked about that. We'll have to look at our different exposures, both legally and operationally and financially.
They're going to be making a claim for money, though.
We'll. I would expect.
I mean,
a
they did
claim.
work at someone's direction and completed work, and while it was outside the scope of their contract, they're still going to want to get paid.
Correct. Right. I just don't necessarily want to discuss our strategy and how we react to that in a public meeting.
Do we have an idea what that money amount might be?
I believe, Omar, do you know? $871,000.
Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. So the original task order 25, correct me if I'm wrong, was for 1.7 million.
That's in the ballpark, yes.
And we're hearing now that Hinterland has a change order in for 870,000. That has never come to us,
It
correct?
has not.
Okay, and then we're also looking now at 750,000 that you want. So we're upwards of about $3.5 million, right? How much of that is actually the playgrounds?
So I believe the playground is just north of 400,000.
400,000 that has not been paid for the playground.
We do not know that yet.
Although we have paid and budgeted, I think, $330,000 for the playgrounds. So we're looking at playgrounds of up to $1 million. What are we getting for that Taj Mahal playground?
I don't draw the connection to the $1 million. The playground and the artificial turf, which were installed by a playground installer, amount to about $400,000.
How did the playground change in scope so much from what originally was intended to what's sitting there now and has not been paid for?
I do not know that answer, but we will.
So
learn
we're
that
going to
answer.
find that out, John, in the audit.
That is the goal, is to determine how we had scope creep
Yes.
in the
scope
project.
creep. Okay, and how all of that got approved, right? Because I would imagine that at some point in time, if procurement or public works or whatever said, hey, there's an issue here, or no, we can't go forward, that would have happened. But I'm concerned that there's been a long time that's happened in this time frame. I mean, this didn't just happen yesterday, so this is something that's been happening for quite a while, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so that's a big concern, and I'm looking forward to that forensic audit that will help us understand all that. Okay, thank you. Moving right along, do we know exactly what that punch list, I'm looking at the CAM now, and it says contract to complete the remaining punch list items on the playground. So what's still remaining on the playground?
I could pull up an email and read to you what it is, but it's a handful of just finishing touches. But they just have to be done by a certified installer from that company, from the playground company.
Okay, but the playground's installed.
It is yes, the playground equipment is there.
It's
it has
there,
just not been
unpaid
signed
for.
off on. It has not been signed off on for use. So it's there and it's roped off. When we have a list of items that needed to be corrected so that it can pass a final, I'm not an expert in this, but I guess they measure the distance between bars and tighten bolts and that kind of thing.
Okay, so that hasn't happened.
That's correct.
Okay, so I'm looking still at the CAM, and I'm looking at what happened with regards to the history of the project and the sewer breaks and the water work that was originally scheduled for Hinterland in their scope. But then I'm seeing language that's kind of strange because it talks about out-of-scope work, absence of an approved change order, lack of approved funding, Hinterland Group cannot be permitted to finish the remaining work. And then I'm also seeing a lot of information about how it's almost as if just the neighborhood decided all of this without any of this coming to the commission. Help me understand that, because I keep reading about at the request of the neighborhood, but never anything approved by the commission. And we're talking about $3 million, or we're talking about a really extravagant playground that, God bless them, I would hope that every park gets this playground. I don't know how we would ever afford that, but I would like to know how that happened. But additional scope changes requested by the neighbors, help me understand that.
Yeah, so I think that's partly how we ended up maybe off track here a little bit. What should have happened in this project is every time a change order at less than 10% the value of the contract was identified, it should have come forward for approval before the work was done. In this circumstance, it didn't. And when the change order finally came through and it was $800,000+ on $1.7 million, even I can do that math in my head and realize that's more than 10%. And so that's why it didn't come forward to the commission, and we looked into it further. I can tell you, this has been a neighborhood that, yes, we've been very impactful to for the last couple of years. They are very engaged, and that's not a bad thing. They have opinions, and we like to listen to them. And candidly, we probably were more sympathetic than we would be in a lot of circumstances, just because we have been so impactful on the neighborhood. We just should have followed the correct procurement policies moving the project forward, and not all of a sudden bring to the commission a change order that there was no way we could support to approve.
Right, and I agree with you. I mean, I think we all understand what that neighborhood went through, but then again, we do have processes in place for a specific reason, not to find ourselves in a situation like we're finding ourselves in now.
I agree.
To the tune of millions of dollars. And there is a way that these change orders happen, and there's a way that the commission approves them, and, you know, there's just that very, very important process. Okay, so I want to go to another item, because I'm concerned when I read this, and I don't know how anyone can do this, but I'm reading that part of this work that it conducted was a narrowing of Southeast 11th Street. That was all of a sudden not in the scope, but became part of the unauthorized scope. Is that correct?
I'd have to let our engineers explain how or what that was intended to do. But I do know that there was an attempt at a roadway narrowing to eliminate some flooding. Beyond that, I don't have the technical expertise to tell you what that roadway narrowing does.
Right. Again, my concern is, and again, you know, all sympathies to the neighborhood. I've never really heard of a neighborhood dictating that they can just narrow a street without something like that coming to the commission. I mean, that's a major issue for me. Again, John, I'm looking forward to you finding out how a lot of these scope, not just scope creep, but just, you know, scope issues that are not necessarily creep, but just something that I don't think I've ever seen before. Again, I don't know how a street just gets narrowed without commission approval, whether it's for drainage or for whatever. And again, where's that money coming from? Is that coming from the general fund? That's just something that I, you know, need to understand a little bit more. Moving right along. I think that's it. I'm good for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. Commissioner Sorensen, do you have any questions?
Yep. Thanks, Mayor, and thank you all for being here. And this neighborhood has been through a lot for almost 2 years, and it's just been such a challenging process. So I appreciate, Chris, your day in and day out work on this and the department's work. Do we know when the Hinterland contract, which was not appropriately approved for park work, started expanding into park work? Like, when did that happen, timeline-wise?
I don't know an exact date off the top of my head, but my gut is as the pipe project was finishing, as we were attempting to start mobilizing to do the remediation. I mean, look, we didn't want to be in the neighborhood as long as we've been in the neighborhood just getting this work done. So I'd have to go back and just review procurement notes and things to be able to give you a specific date.
The original task order 25, was dated October of 2020.
Yeah.
So that was the first official task order that my understanding is for that project. Although work may have commenced before then, I don't know. But from at least a paper standpoint, it appears to be in October.
Okay. I think that's important to know as we look at this. And as we look at kind of the forensic audit and kind of understanding checks and balances, Chris, one of my concerns is the rising to your level and just checks and balances, or that, you know, came to you, or we need to improve that, you know, you can't improve everything, but just any thoughts there from your perspective?
Yeah, so I'm very, I mean, the question I need answered that I haven't had answered yet is why the person that's in charge of the procurement for the city, as the chief procurement officer, why that sign off occurred, because
Yep.
that's who I would go to make a purchasing decision. So it's my belief, and as long as I've managed, I always keep that person at least a degree of separation away from being a direct report, because that keeps the manager in the manager's office with some ability to say that, you know, they don't direct and influence procurement, especially as it comes to competitive solicitations. You never want to have that opportunity to say, you know, pick this company or that company, and somebody feel compelled to do it. But that'll be a big question that I have answered, because that's where I would have gone to find out if it was appropriate or not. And for whatever reason, at the time that it was moving forward, it was thought to be appropriate.
And when you think about timelines, so if if we do approve today, both these items, what's your sense of kind of timeline going forward for finishing up the work on these two?
Obviously, we've got
Finishing
the-
up which work?
So finishing up the work, so in Rio Vista, we've got roads that needs to be paved, Mayor. We've got
Sidewalks.
playgrounds that have to be finished, sidewalks, there's stormwater
I'm
work.
going to
that
look
has to be
again to
done.
Omar Omar, you think we could get this work done, what's left within 30 days? a
Wait,
month?
wait. You've got to come up and speak. You can't come back there. Can you come up to the podium, please? Can you check to make sure the microphone is on also?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Please
Chris,
identify yourself and
Omar Castellan, I'm the chief engineer for Public Works, one of the two chief engineers. We have to look at the annual contracts that we have. We need to see if we have anybody that can do the playground. If that's the case, I think 30 days is reasonable to finish the work,
the playground, 30 days,
the whole job.
the whole job.
The whole
So
job,
the
yeah.
streets, the sidewalks,
Yeah, and the swales.
the
And we
swales,
still have some
and the playground in 30
playground. We
days.
still got some harmonization to do with the driveways where the sidewalks were raised. So I think 30 days is reasonable as long as we have all the contractors,
And
on
so,
the house.
but have you identified a contractor?
No, we haven't yet.
There's a couple that I think can do the work, and so if this happens to move forward today, which I hope it does, we'll get those couple of contractors on the phone and figure out who can number one, get it done correctly, but two, most efficiently.
Okay, I mean, it's nice to think that we can call and say, start, and think that they're going to be doing nothing, and that they're going to be working for us the next day. I don't know if companies work that way, but.
I think we've got a couple that would mobilize that quickly.
Yeah, I
Okay.
agree.
I'm sorry, Commissioner, I just wanted to get some
Yeah,
definition here.
no, thanks. And Chris, part of this, I'm assuming part of the punch list is that, I emailed you today about that, I think it's southeast, southeast 9th Ave, the one-way. I think you saw that. Did you?
I haven't seen an email yet today, but when we mobilize and then demobilize from the site, the goal is to have all the punch list items cleared, is to reject any work that's not done correctly and have it redone.
Yeah.
Just as we would on any construction project. So by the time we demobilize out of there, our belief is that it will be a complete project, just like every other project we work to completion.
Great. And I mean, just kind of for a holistic view, playground is definitely part of this, but we're talking about there needs to be drains that need to be lowered, right? I mean, there's just roads that need to be, haven't been paved in a year and a half. I mean, there's just so much still yet to do.
Yeah, those elevations, as I understand it, will be set when the road is paved. So you are correct that there are some catch basins that'll be raised or lowered based upon the engineering needs in the neighborhood, and that'll all be done before the project is complete.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks.
Anything further?
Actually, could I ask Omar a question?
Sure. Does Omar need to
Oh, I'm
say?
sorry, unless Commissioner Sorensen still has more.
No, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, you're good, Omar. Thank
Could
you.
I ask Omar a question?
Yeah, you want to ask him questions?
Yeah.
Oh, Omar, come back up, please.
Thank you.
I asked you if you wanted to ask him.
Oh, no, I was deferring. I didn't know if Commissioner Sorensen was
sorry.
finished yet. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Omar, help me understand, because I've heard from some folks that the actual playground equipment was just maybe around 5 years old, and what was the need for it to totally be replaced as opposed to just sanitized or just cleaned off? Do you have any idea why that occurred?
When we decided to redo these parks, the playground was in pretty bad shape. There was a lot of equipment stored on site. A lot of the playground a lot of the irons were broken through the flooding and through different things. They were not, some of them could not be reused. So the HOA got together with Public Works and decided to use a different type of playground, and that's what we do. We got our landscape designer guy work with the HOA, to come up with a design, and that's how the playground was picked.
And then how was that design approved? The new design,
That design was approved by the HOA.
not the commission,
We had a public hearing on
We
it.
did have a public hearing
on the
that,
new
yeah.
design?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I think it was in July
Now,
of last year.
Hinterland was hired for stormwater work, correct? So, but Hinterland, the stormwater contractor, actually installed the playground?
Yes.
What were their qualifications to do the playground, install equipment and install playground equipment as the stormwater contractor?
So they hire a sub they purchased the playground from a sub, and they hire a installer, a qualified installer to install the playground.
So Hinterland hired a sub
Yeah.
to install the contract. And who approved that?
That was the initial task order that it was signed, the 1.7 million.
That was approved by what method?
There was an initial task order that had a pass-through item for $230,000.
You're talking about task order 20?
That's correct, 25, which was
Yes,
in
okay.
October.
Okay.
Then there was, as the city manager stated earlier, a change order that was provided or that they were trying to process through in July of this year that had another pass-through item for an additional, I want to say $365,000?
Yeah.
265, right, 360 for that same playground equipment. So you had 230, and then you had the additional. So again, that's where we haven't connected the dots yet, because I don't know if Hinterland has paid completely for that equipment or whether they just expended the 230 and they may be out by that. I don't know. And then the additional amount may be what they've already paid or what they need to pay. We don't know.
So,
But there was the initial task order that had, again, as the city manager stated, was beyond the scope of the contract, but a pass-through item was used to add playgrounds in there for $230,000. But that was it at the time, and then the change order contemplated another $365 again through that, and we say erroneously through that pass-through line item for another $365 or $360, something like that.
do we know who? That's expensive for a lot of change orders that the commission never saw. But again, what kind of playground equipment is this? Where did it come from? Where did we get it?
I don't know. I can't remember the name, but it's pretty high end. I don't know what.
It's an European-made playground. I think the name of the company is Compen. That's the name of the company, Compen, and it's an European manufacturer that builds these playgrounds.
So, is that all kosher for us to just hire a European contractor to install playground equipment without any bids or without any competitive process, or is that kosher?
Well, there's a variety of things in your questions there. Putting this situation aside, typically if you don't have a contractor, you have to procure that. So that would have to be procured. Or if it fit under some sort of sole source proprietary, then you would possibly have that here. This may have fallen into that, just to the extent that they have, although there's probably 100 certified installers that probably could be chosen from. I don't know locally if there's that many. So I don't know based on the information we have now. But typically, if, at least going back on the park remediation, you probably should have, procured that aspect of it, since you didn't have an existing contract that had that scope of work in it.
Right, and especially if it's that high end of a company that's doing the playground equipment. I mean, again, I'm thinking that that's terrific, but I'm just wondering if we're going to be able to do that everywhere.
Well, typically, if there's going to be an increase or an upgrade, that's going to result in a change order, because the original 230 presumably would not have been enough for that equipment. So the proper way to do it would then be, okay, so we're upgrading the equipment because we want better equipment. That would come through a change order that would be approved by the city commission. That did not occur.
Correct. And we can assume that whoever provided that European playground equipment has not gotten paid.
Only to the extent that Hinterland's been paid the $1.7 million from the original task order. And again, some of the pieces we're trying to put together. Some of them I won't telegraph because unfortunately I think we're going to get into a dispute situation.
Oh, I think we are, yeah.
So I'm not going to telegraph what my position is going to be on it, but I suspect that they're out some money, yes.
Okay, thanks. So again, John, I look really forward to the forensic audit on all this because I have so many questions that I'm not going to just take everyone's time with, but there's a lot of gaps here. There are a lot of questions. There's a lot of whys, who, how, what, where. So I just, I think I put enough out there that in terms of the general questions that I have, but I just look forward to the continued conversation. Thank you.
Yes, no, and we agree, and that's why we thought it very important not to do this in-house, because I think the level of expertise required for a forensic audit, there's a certain set of qualifications and procedural steps you follow when you do anything of that, particularly if we may wind up in litigation. This is something where we need to be exceptionally cautious in how the work is performed, how the work is documented, and we think that, again, having that level of expertise, folks who can, testify as expert witnesses if necessary, is critical at this juncture for us.
No, I agree 100% because obviously processes just fell apart here and protocols fell apart here and, just the way we do business in the city fell apart here. And again, not that I begrudge anything to Rio Vista for what they've been going through. It's been absolutely horrendous. But, a neighborhood just can't say we want this street narrowed and Public Works says, okay, fine. A neighborhood can't just say we want this European playground equipment and Public Works says fine. There's just got to be a process here so that this does not happen again. To anyone, to any vendor, it's not fair to the staff, it's not fair to the contractors, it's not fair to the commission, actually, and the city as a whole. So I just really look forward to seeing some of these answers. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, go right ahead. Put your microphone on. Okay.
Sorry about that. When we hire a contractor, Chris, obviously they sign a contract. Does it state in that contract for any change orders over 10%, you have to get commissioner approval?
That's a fairly standard language in our contracts across the board.
So they all say that, and this contractor has
Typically
worked
grants in me the administrative authority to grant a change order.
Under
up to
10%.
Up to 10%
Yeah,
without coming back
correct.
to the commission. But
But-
as soon as it values more than 10%, we have to be back in front of the
So
commission.
they understand that. So we may have some sort of protection as a city, and we've used this contractor before.
Again, generally, when you're dealing with sophisticated contractors, this is standard operating procedure in any construction, that any changes to the scope of your contract or to the amount, you're going to want to do that for their own protection. So the law generally recognizes that a contractor should know and should operate by. So yes, they should know that.
All right, even though they may have been directed, they should. So that's what we'll have to figure out later. Okay.
Okay, great. I'm just trying to see if I can wrap my head around all of this, because I'm hearing more things this afternoon than I was made aware of even before this meeting. So the original contract with Hinterland was 1.7 million.
No,
Yes, that was the original task order.
The original task order. The original contract was entered into in 2017 for general. There were 4 companies that were awarded in 2017 for the stormwater
For the
type
stormwater,
work.
yeah.
So that's sort of a general contract that was entered into 2017. And then the task order, correct, was for the 1.7 million, which was a different project, which was the remediation of the parks.
Okay, so that was for 1.7 million, and that was in October of 2020?
I believe that's what it stated, yeah.
Okay, so the 1.7 million was specifically for the rehabilitation of the park, which did not include the playground.
It did include the playground, but it had a pass-through item at the bottom, so it's a line item contract. So it had various line items for the work that was in the task order, and then there was some pass-through items, specifically, there's a pass-through item for specialized construction activities allowance, and a pass-through item, I don't know if you're familiar.
Explain
but-
to us what
right.
that means.
So, let's say you're hired to install a bunch of pipes, and there's some allowances made in those line items for things that may not have been as expected. So, I'm putting in these pipes, and there's these 2 clamps that I needed that I just forgot I'm supposed to need. So I need another $5,000 to go get these clamps to be able to finish. So the pass-throughs are intended to be sort of that, sort of fudge factor there to accommodate things that you may not have foreseen, reasonably not foreseen. So that's the initial red flag that comes up, because here, even though that was in the RFP, there's a parenthetical that's added to the task order for playground and I think ADA ramps. So that parenthetical was added, I don't know by who or how, but that was added to that pass-through, and for $230,000, which is pretty high for a pass-through.
So that pass-through allocation was specifically for playground equipment.
It was for, I'll quote
It had other things too, but yes, it was there.
Right, it's for, that particular pass-through was pass-through specialized construction activities allowance, which was in the RFP when it was bid,
Right.
but just that. And then in a task order, this particular task order actually has parentheses, testing, a comma, playground. So that was added as part of that specialized.
Okay, so
Construction.
that wasn't part of the original one, but it was added afterwards?
The 230, right, was in the again, nothing to do with the contract. This is just a task order that was
As
added
a pass-through. It's a
Correct.
pass-through.
But for $230,000, that's pretty high, especially if it's not related to stormwater.
All right, so was the $230,000 part of the 1.7 million?
Yes,
Okay. So, and they've been paid the 1.7 million?
that's my understanding as of yesterday.
Okay.
I was informed of that.
Alan, they've been paid 1.6 at this point.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
1.6?
Yeah, because I think Linda told me yesterday. they've been
Okay.
paid.
So then we have a change order in July of 2021.
Right.
Okay. And what did the change order say?
It was pretty much the same line items. I have it here, so I'd have to go through and check, but they're very similar line items with the same pass-throughs, but different amounts. And that the total amount for all of those line items and those pass-throughs was now 800 and something,
71.
$71,000.
871,000 was the change order in July of 2021.
Right, which when we saw that, we put a stop to it. So that was never approved. And our understanding was, and courts can possibly say to validate what I'm about to say, but my understanding was that the dominant amount of that work was already completed.
Right. And what was the amount again, John?
871.
871? Okay. So someone showed up with a bill for 871,000 and said, please pay it. Yet the original contract contemplated a large scope of work, inclusive of the playground equipment and the installation thereof. And then a change order comes across someone's desk and says, hey, we need another $871,000 for work already contemplated by the original contract. Is that correct?
Not the original contract, the original task order.
The task order of October 2020.
Right, because the original contract had nothing to do with playgrounds. There's nothing about playgrounds.
Okay.
With the original task order being 1.7 million, if that change order had come at $169,000, then I probably would have brought it forward or could have just administratively signed it. But when I
Right.
saw 871,
Right.
I didn't have the authority to do that.
Okay. So, so this is in addition to the 1.7 million, the 871,000, correct?
If it had been paid, it would be.
If
in
it had been
addition
paid,
to-
it would
yes.
have been, okay, so now we're at 2.5 million. And did you already describe to us what the 871 contemplated in terms of the scope of work, or has that not?
No, Alan was just, he could go down the list of line items, but it's
Yeah,
just
there's-
generally the same items, just additional value added to them.
Right, but there was, again, I think it included, and Omar can jump in anytime, and I think it included, obviously, the upgrades to the playground, the additional costs to that. I don't know if the turf field, the turf was actually added after the fact or the original task order. There was the narrowing of the street, raising of the sidewalks. There's additional things involved in that. Obviously, there's more asphalt. There's all these things that go with making those types of changes. I believe those were the things included in the change order,
Yeah.
which the substantial part was completed. The problem is that now it's not fully completed, and we're left with the situation where there's some unsafe conditions.
Yeah,
Right,
raising,
so-
raising of the roads was a big one there because
Yeah.
you need a lot more asphalt
Right.
to do that.
Right, and that was done under whose direction, the raising of the roads? If that was not part of if this was a change order, and it contemplated an expense of $871,000, who authorized that change order for that amount of money? Do you know, does anybody know the answer to that question?
I don't know the answer to that today. Presumably, we agreed to it. And
What's that?
I said presumably somebody in our team agreed to it. I
Wouldn't
don't-
that raise a red flag with the contractor that, hey, wait a minute, this is going to be a lot of work you're asking me to do, and it's going to cost over almost $1 million. The contractor must have thought that there was some apparent authority or a color of authority by the asking agent to have gone ahead and authorized this. And was there anything in writing to this effect?
Not anything official in the way of, like I said, a change order, contract amendment, anything like that. There's nothing official. I don't know about emails or anything else. We haven't looked into that yet, but
there's nothing that could be relied upon.
no. And our position would be, our legal position would be, as I stated to the vice mayor, that this is a sophisticated contractor that knows better. And as you just stated, if you're going to put yourself out there and do close to $1 million worth of work without an approved change order, that's pretty risky business.
Right. So today you're asking us to say, hey, we're not asking you to allow us to pay the $871,000. You're asking us the authority to finish what work needs to be done, and you're probably going to use a different contractor and deal with Hinterland in another way, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Today-
That's what the point of this meeting is about.
Correct.
Today is strictly prospective and getting this neighborhood back to where it needs to be. And then we're going to go back, obviously, through the audit and any other means, and obviously potential legal action to deal with what's already happened.
Now, is part of this $871,000, does it contemplate work yet to be performed, or is it work that they claim has been performed? Do we know that?
My understanding is there's some left over, but we were in a situation where it was outside of scope and outside of contract, so we couldn't legitimately say, please continue and finish, because there was no basis for us to do that.
The question, I guess, then to Omar, so if we had approved 871, did we get to the finish line with the project, or do we still come up short?
We still will come up short, but a lot of that work has been completed on that. Yeah.
Okay.
Say it again, Omar. I didn't quite hear the end of that.
On the change order, probably about 80-90% of the work has been completed at this point by the contract.
So 80 or 90% of the 871,000 has been completed, and yet you're saying that in order to truly complete the work that has to be done, which is the roads, the sidewalks, the realigning of the sidewalks with certain driveways, and the finishing up of the playground equipment and park, is going to be about what?
Well, we're asking for a cost not to exceed $750,000. I certainly don't think we're going to need that much, but I don't want to be back here needing, I don't want to be 10,000 short and have to come back. So obviously, I hope to report back to you in 30 or 60 days that we finished it for substantially less than that. But I will come back and report whatever it does cost to finish. You'll know.
All right. If the commission does agree to do this, can we get some sort of line item accounting of what certain things cost? Like, for example, what this playground actually costs? I mean, that's pretty gold-plated swing set. It's like ridiculous. So
Yeah, no, I believe we have that level of detail, so we can.
Okay.
Is that correct, Omar? We have that level of
Yes,
detail?
we do. We
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Okay, does that help clarify some things?
A little bit, Mayor. You touched on something, and I just want to look at a little bit more, whether it's with Omar or Chris. But looking at the CAM, and I'll just quote: "Due to the project not being able to be completed by Hinterland," and I'm assuming that's not their choice, right? They were just told to stop.
They were told to stop, yes.
Okay. There are immediate and outstanding safety concerns that need to be addressed as soon as possible. That's why I guess what we're here today, not waiting 12 more days. Some of these safety concerns include ongoing flooding as a result of the new sidewalk getting raised along Ponce de Leon Drive at the residents' request. So help me understand, because it does say at the resident's request, but was the new sidewalks and what was done to mitigate that flooding, was that part of the original scope?
Not to my understanding, but
No,
almost
it
no.
wa- it was not.
Because no, even though they were hired for stormwater and this is dealing with flooding, that was not part of the original scope.
Part of the original scope for the stormwater was to put new pipes in order to drain the park in the area around Hector Park, but no, it was not. Raising the road was not.
Okay, so is it actually raising the roads or just raising the sidewalks, or what are we raising?
Well, we're raising the roads and the sidewalks.
We're raising the roads and the sidewalks.
And the sidewalks and putting swells in the areas where the road was narrow. So one of the reasons why the road was narrow is to add more swells to
Okay.
retain water and for better drainage.
Okay, so I understand. So again, because I have certain streets in my district that have been screaming for years about the flooding on their street and what can we do to raise the roads and help the flooding, no action. So they'll hear this or they'll read this and they'll see at the resident's request, this is all just happening like that. So again, I am very concerned, and John, I need to find out how this happens so I can help some of my neighborhoods also just take care of flooding and raise the roads and raise the sidewalks, and everyone can have a really good time and be treated equally. So I look forward to that. So thank you.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, John, when will we get that report? Do you have an estimate?
At this point, no. We are still in the process of working on the purchase order to get the firm on board to start that work. So once we've got the purchase order, then I can sit down with the team involved and outline with them about how long they think that work is going to take. The problem with forensic audits is, unlike traditional audits, you don't know where they're going to lead. So as we start to look into this, we may find as we pull the thread that the arm falls off the sweater. So, but we've got a scope of work. We have an initial anticipated amount, and hopefully, if the documentation is available, we're able to see everything we need to see. I can't imagine, and please don't hold me to this, hoping it will be ready in less than a month. But again, like I said, all that is really dependent on when we can get the purchase order done. Their staff is available. It's just a matter of us being able to provide them with everything they need in order for them to do their review. And if they find things that they need to look into further, obviously that will take longer.
Okay, so today we're going to approve the amount for Chris so you can pay everyone. John's going to work on the audit. And then Alan, you separately are going to work with Hinterland to see what we're disputing, that final amount?
Right, we're going to handle but some of it may be dependent on what we find. Obviously, I'm not going to speak too much about what I'm going to be doing in that regard. I don't want to telegraph
So
that
you
publicly.
may need the audit results before you finalize?
I don't need them, but they're certainly going to be helpful, because then instead of both of us looking for the same thing at the same time, we can work off the same work product. But
Okay,
some of that will be driven by Hinterland themselves, because they presumably have subs that need to get paid.
all right, so today, hopefully we approve the amount, we can fix the work, and then after this, we'll work on the outstanding amount with Hinterland, and then how we got here with John, and then we'll come back and discuss whatever we need to next. All right?
Okay, any further questions? All right, would someone like to introduce R1?
And on R1, Mayor, I just did want to clarify that in Section 2, you're authorizing the manager to enter into some contracts with some companies so we could finish this. That will include our typical process of accepting and approving certain task orders for the work to be done. So even though that's not stated in there, that's our typical process. We have a contract. There's a contract amount in this case, or amounts that you're now approving. So there will be task orders that the manager will be able to approve through that amount. And if there's any amount, obviously, that's necessary above that, which we don't anticipate, we'd come back to you.
So what will that threshold number be then?
So you're providing $750,000 as a total amount. So the city manager has that discretion to go ahead and obviously enter into new contracts with these companies for particular, very specific work that needs to be done. So
Right.
we're all clear as to what the work is and what the scope is. Certain monies will be obviously attributed to each of those contracts. So let's say one contract is, $3 million. That contract will sort of have that limitation built in, but the city manager, in order to get this done within 30 days or so, will be able to approve task orders against that amount in order for that work to be done. So those task orders won't be coming back to you. They'll be approved
All right,
by
so
the
we're
city manager.
authorizing work to be done up to $750,000 then.
Which we do not anticipate will be needed, of course, but just to be safe.
Okay. Okay, would someone like to introduce R1?
Introduced.
It's been introduced. Please call the roll.
A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, waiving the mandatory commission approval amount and the competitive solicitation and selection process contained in the City of Fort Lauderdale procurement ordinance for procuring construction to complete the remaining roadway work along Ponce de Leon Drive, Southeast 11th Street and Southeast 9th Avenue, in completion of the remaining work in Hector Park and punch list items on the playground and artificial turf work in Virginia S. Young Park, authorizing the city manager to enter into and execute contracts on behalf of the City of Fort Lauderdale and providing an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Before I vote, I just want to urge Chris that we never find ourselves in this position again. I'm going to vote yes, but I'm not thrilled about it. But I just think that we must find out how this happened, why this happened, and we have to do whatever we can in the future to make sure that we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you. Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentels?
Yes, and R1 is approved. R2, this is to basically give the city manager the authority to secure the money through the fund balance by approving the consolidated budget amendment for the fiscal year 2021. Would someone like to introduce the resolution?
Introduced.
A resolution in the City Commission of the City of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, amending the City of Fort Lauderdale's final FY 2021 to FY 2025 Community Investment Plan for the fiscal years beginning October 1, 2020 and ending September 30, 2025, as amended by appropriating funds as set forth in City Commission Agenda Memo number 21-0797 and providing for severability and an effective date. Vice Mayor Moritas?
Yes.
Commissioner Glassman?
Yes.
Commissioner Sorensen?
Yes.
Mayor Trentels?
Yes, and R2 is approved. Is there any further business to the commission?
I just have one
Mayor,
quick.
Wait,
Go
hold
ahead.
on.
I don't want to jump in front of the commissioners.
Yeah, Mayor, just a separate topic. Is just want to, I know it's not on the agenda, but just want to touch on COVID. As I'm sure you're aware, we're just hit a peak in terms of folks that are showing up at our hospitals. It's now over 12,000 in the state, 89% ICU beds. So just wanted to explore, just have a brief conversation about any possibility of mask mandates in city property and or incentivizing vaccines, as this is, basically doctors are telling me this is going to get a lot worse. So I'm just very concerned.
Well,
Father of two daughters that obviously are not vaccinated heightens my concern for this.
And your concern is well founded, but Alan, perhaps you can educate us as to what our authority is, given the fact that the governor has entered certain orders, the legislature has passed certain statutes. What authority do we have to do anything? Can we implement a mandatory mask order within city buildings, or in public spaces, or can you give us some help on this?
You have a couple hours?
Yeah.
Things have changed a bit since the legislative session ended. So as of July 1st, the governor's state of emergency is no longer in place, so that's gone, which really removes all the emergency orders. So there's really no emergency order that we're traveling under, the previous ones with the vaccine passport and so on. However, the Florida legislature passed certain legislation, which, and I'll deal with vaccinations first, where both businesses and governments, although it's written a little differently, cannot ask for proof of vaccination. So that does limit us with regards to requiring employees. I know some jurisdictions are pushing the envelope and possibly doing that, but based on our reading of the law, we cannot deny any person. And unlike the business side of it, which is patrons or customers, here it's referred to as persons, from entering and gaining access to our buildings based on documentation for COVID-19. So that's an easier answer on the vaccination side, because I don't think we are entitled or to restrict that.
Alan, isn't Miami-Dade instituting
Yeah,
mask
and some
mandate?
other places are, but I think they're doing it in violation of Florida law. And I believe Leon County has started doing that, and the governor is filing suit against them, I believe. So rather than get into litigation with the governor, I think that it'd be hard to argue based on the way it's written. And we did legislative history on it. We researched it. And unfortunately, the language was added very late, and there was really no floor discussion on it. There was very little discussion, if any, on it. And it doesn't give us any light as to what the intent was behind the use of the word persons, where that was not used for businesses, but it was for government. On the masks, it comes down to they've also amended the emergency management statute. So now there's two components to it. One, it was always an emergency was an emergency beforehand. Now they've separated it into sort of weather-related emergencies and health-related emergencies. So we have very, very tight restrictions on what we can do with any sort of official, any sort of rule or anything else that we want to promulgate to impose any kind of restrictions. A lot of hurdles you have to go through, and the governor has the authority to invalidate anything that we issue if you don't go through those hurdles. With the face masks, again, you're going to get challenged by the governor on that, and it's almost impossible to enforce, because you get into a situation, for example, if you have a member of the public coming in right now that says, I'm refusing to wear a mask, and they refuse to leave, your only recourse is to arrest them for trespass. And then what's the headline? Fort Lauderdale arrests man for not wearing masks. And then you're getting into a situation where you're de facto mandating something to the public and denying them access to a public building. So it becomes very difficult to enforce, even if you, in fact, I think the town of Palm Beach went ahead and did that to go ahead and mandate masks, but they, in the same breath, said that there's really no way for us to enforce it. So you could pass something like that if you wanted to, or make it a rule, but there's no teeth to it. You really can't enforce it.
Because of the governor's
Not so much
order,
the
because of
governor.
the statute.
The statute partly, because I think under the emergency management, now that it's been truncated and we have special sections dealing with health, the only state of emergency in existence is the counties. They still have one. Ms. Henry has been renewing it every 7 days for the last year and a half. So that's still in place. But beyond that, we'd almost have to do our own. And then again, there's a whole bunch of hoops, and I think immediately you get an order from the governor invalidating it.
So we can ask for people to wear masks. We can't enforce them. That's the problem.
And incentivizing vaccines possibility
You
for
run
city
it-
employees.
Yeah, you run into a couple issues there. One, there's nothing that bars it, but you're going to have some union issues because there may be disparities. So there's individuals that have already been vaccinated. So if you incentivize somebody now at the 11th hour, let's say, for lack of a better term, to get a vaccine, well, I did the responsible thing and I got my vaccine 2 months ago, so where's my incentive? So all of a sudden now you have a disparity issue, which the unions might have an issue with, and so it becomes a bit complicated. It's not impossible, but it's hard to do.
Yeah, I mean, so I think we've got limited options.
Well, the county
When-
imposed a mask
Exactly.
ordinance within their county buildings.
Right.
I mean, if we issued an emergency order, if my office issued an emergency order requiring masks, you're saying that we can do it, but then we can't enforce it. The governor tells
You couldn't issue one right now because you would need so much data to support your emergency order that I don't think we didn't have that in hand. I mean, we can look at it, but even you issuing or the city issuing an emergency declaration or an emergency order has gotten very difficult on the health side. On the weather side, easy as before. But on the health side, there's a lot of hoops you have to go through. And if you don't have the metrics in there and you don't have the justification, it's immediately validated by the governor. So we can look at it. But again, even if you do that, we still have an enforcement issue where you're putting our police officers in situations, because you can't ask your line item staff or code enforcement to even enforce it. You're dealing with law enforcement at that point, and you're putting them in a pretty tough spot. Because if we do enter, one of the concerns I have is, having represented our officers for many years, is even if it's somebody trying to make a point, they're going to sue Officer A, Officer B, and the city. That Officer A, Officer B now has a lawsuit in the system with his name or her name on it. And then we get into these situations where something happens, you pull up all the lawsuits, and all of a sudden this officer has all these lawsuits, and all of a sudden it's a bad officer because they have lawsuits. So I try to avoid those confrontations, and I think we're going to get them.
Yeah, it's horrible. I mean, we're just given so little we can do. I'd be interested. I mean, it seems like so many of our tools have been taken away from us to combat this. I mean, it seems like one of the options we can at least explore is possibly incentives for vaccinations. I'd like to look into that if possible, Mayor.
Well, I'd look into it. As just an example, I spoke with the city manager about perhaps giving people a $25 gift certificate at Publix, right?
Yep.
So we contacted Publix, and could you give us a discount? And they
Yep.
were like, they kind of just blew us off.
Okay.
So we can't really rely on Publix. And after that point, I just kind of dropped it. But it's I don't know. Do you have any other ideas, Commissioner, about incentivization?
Yeah, incentives. Yeah. So
Give
I mean,
them a free tour of City Hall.
a gift. Yeah, exactly. Spend a day with the mayor.
Yeah. Hey.
Could be wonderful. A gift card, or I don't know if I know some cities have done like amount of time, an hour off. Time off for getting. I think even just kind of exploring that maybe a little bit more may be worthwhile, because I don't know the number of staff that have COVID currently out of our city staff, but just I mean, I think there's a number that do. So I think it might be worthwhile looking into.
It's just very scary, and because you have two little girls that are under the age of eligibility, it's even scarier. And I don't blame you. It's and those that have been vaccinated are clearly much better off than those that are unvaccinated. Yet the statistic I read in the paper this past week was that 50% of the population of Broward approximately has been double vaccinated. 95% of seniors have, and 75% have had at least one shot. So as communities go, we're not doing it that bad, but there's still 50% that haven't been vaccinated.
Yep.
Okay, and so it's very concerning to me, because we're seeing children under the age of 10 finding their way in the emergency room. I think there was 40-something patients now that are children, pediatric cases, which we never saw before under the previous variant or the previous disease. Right. So this is a roller coaster ride that I did not ask to be on, or did you? And I don't know how we get off, but our hands are often tied by authorities that are senior to us, and it's very, very frustrating. All we can do is try to be personally responsible, making sure that if we feel that we're putting others at risk, to wear a mask, and make sure we're all vaccinated, and do our best to try to just keep one another safe from the spread of this disease. So anyway, any other comments or questions? I have one other thing I'd like to bring up, and I can end the meeting, and it's just a discussion. In fact, I will end the meeting. I would like you to stay though, just to discuss this. So the meeting. Any further business?
If you're going to discuss it, you need.
All right. So I won't end the meeting. What's going on with Chick-fil-A? I mean, this has gotten so out of hand.
Have the sandwiches quality gone down?
What's that?
Has the sandwich quality gone down?
Yeah, apparently not.
Oh, I couldn't. I was just. I was
Ask,
wondering what you were talking about.
I mean,
I'll ask Ben to come to the
their
podium.
business license was given to them in anticipation of their having a in-service table service restaurant with drive-through. They have just now opened their drive-through. Opened their indoor service, and we see lines that are completely interfering with the other cross streets, with Walgreens, other businesses trying to interact. And I don't see how that business is doing anything to try to mitigate the impact. It really concerns me that we sit back and say, oh, we can't do anything.
Yeah, we have been working with them for probably about 8 months. I think Ben Rogers or Chris can give
Yeah,
the
I'll see
update.
if Ben
We've
can-
But
also,
nothing's happened.
well,
to the
we're
podium.
waiting on FDOT. Things are happening. We've worked with them.
What's
they've-
happening? Ben Rogers,
They've been very
come on down.
gracious every time we've met with them, and just
Ben's a
like
fan of the cool
every
rap.
other business, they had to shut down their indoor dining. So this is, go ahead, Ben.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Commissioners. Ben Rogers, Director of Transportation Mobility. As Vice Mayor Moritas said, in April, we met with Chick-fil-A and kind of put them on notice on some of the observations we had with the traffic congestion, the backing up into US 1. At that time, we met with their corporate office. We talked through a couple different plans that they could go through. One, they were going to work on having a consultant to improve their drive-through model, bring different technologies, and see how they can just internally improve their service level. The second option was to work with FDOT because they have the US 1 jurisdiction and go through a review process to see if they can do a site plan modification and add a secondary curb cut for an exit lane. So if you think about the configuration of that site right now, the entrance lane and the exit lane are both in the exact same spot. And so what they're proposing to do and working with FDOT is to create a dedicated exit lane so they can have additional capacity on the end lane. So that process right now, they just completed the pre-review period. They got some comments back from FDOT, and their team is now designing to FDOT's level. What they'll do is they'll submit a formal application to FDOT. FDOT will review that and either approve a variance or they'll deny the variance based on FDOT standards. If they approve the variance, then it would come to the city and it would go through an administrative review process before they could make any changes to the site.
Well, that doesn't sound to me like immediate relief. Sounds to me like it's going to take 6 to 8 months before we get some sort of resolution. And it's just not fair. I mean, no business has the right to interfere with the operation of the rest of the city. We had the same problem with Starbucks on Davie Boulevard. How do we resolve that? Is it resolved? I mean, Ben, is
No,
it?
it's not.
No.
It's not, right? I
I
mean,
don't
this
know
is
why that
not
was
fair.
approved.
And perhaps we need to be more circumspect down the road when we start authorizing the construction of new businesses to really focus on traffic mitigation, because right now we're talking about there's the new Publix that wants to open up on Federal Highway. Well, that's going to be an absolute nightmare for the people that live in Bal Harbor. There's one way in and one way out in Bal Harbor, and you've got one main exit for that shopping plaza, which is in the same location. Those people are going to be trapped in their own neighborhoods because they'll be unable to get out of there. So, a word of caution to our departments that we cannot allow these new buildings, these new businesses to locate where they wish to locate unless we come up with legitimate traffic plans that are going to anticipate the amount of vehicular traffic that come in and out of these businesses. Because this is an absolute disaster. So anyway.
So we are working on it, just like Ben said, just yesterday they opened their indoor dining, but like Ben Sorensen said, we have this also mix of, do you want people inside close together? So, there's some personal issues with that. So I think we have to be a little bit more accommodating during COVID to,
Well, COVID's not going to go away tomorrow. That's the thing.
I understand, but it's spiking. And if we're trying to encourage people to go inside and eat versus outside in the drive-through lane, which that's what we're trying to do, get them inside so that they don't back up in the drive-through lane, people are going to have different opinions about that. So we can't mandate that they go inside and eat either. So
No, we can't.
we are trying, and we are trying to encourage the inside dining, which, like Ben said, they opened up. So hopefully that'll help alleviate. In terms of the Publix on where H.H. Gregg is, where Bal Harbor, they will not all egress onto Bal Harbor Street. There's definitely Federal Highway where they can exit. So it's another conversation we'll have when it comes back to us.
Well, the problem is it's not going to come to us. We're not going to have that
Well, even
conversation.
if it does, Anthony, isn't there another road where they can get out on Federal Highway? They don't have to go out on that street where Bow Harbor is?
They can only come out on Federal Highway or on 19th Street, excuse me.
Right, but they don't have to go out on 19th Street. I doubt a lot of people will, because that's not a good place to get out. So,
Well, but the problem is that that's where there's a traffic light, so people will at least be able to exit the shopping center safely. Using the other exit, there's no traffic light, so you're at risk, trying to get out in a safe way. Anthony, do you have any thoughts on this?
Anthony Fajardo, Director of Sustainable Development. On Publix, or the overall topic of traffic in the right-of-way, the Publix is definitely going to be limited, and we are working with the applicant on how to mitigate for that. And it's my understanding, I need to go back and check, but it's my understanding that they've met all the traffic requirements for that site and that location.
Well, I don't think they. Can we see that as commissioners? Can we just see what the so-called met all their traffic requirements? Because the same answer was given to us when I asked about Trader Joe's, and we said, oh, they met all the traffic requirements. Well, that's another nightmare.
Yes, it is.
So whatever our traffic requirements are, they're definitely failing this community, because we have limited space on our roads. We have popular places of business, and we're not figuring this thing out ahead of time, and we're just frustrating the whole traffic experience. The number one complaint that we get year after year from our citizens is traffic in every single survey. And all we're doing now is making it worse. So I really think we need to stop looking at whether they comply or whether there's a reality here in which traffic mitigation really needs to be addressed. Anyway, my feelings. Those are my feelings. Anyone else have any feelings? All right.
Well, I think especially
We all
for
need
drive-throughs, Mayor. I mean, I think this is a major challenge that I don't know how we rectify it, but we've got to dig in.
We have to. Oh, there's one other thing I wanted to bring up. In the North Beach shops, the village shops.
why is this all District 1? What else do you have about District 1?
Well, I was having dinner the other night there, and
Yeah.
I'm looking at the landscaping.
Oh, we just talked about that yesterday.
Really?
My understanding is the landscaping and the weeds, or go ahead.
Yes, A1A and Sunrise, by the way.
That is
all
not,
weeds.
Wait a
yeah, that's
minute.
not me.
All
That,
weeds.
that's that state.
I'm just saying we had beautiful canopy trees there before we cut them down, and now we've got these sticks, these palm trees that are that aren't even. I mean, even palm trees are not really canopy trees. What have we done to ourselves?
So
But
they
I
will
say
they will grow. Right now they're infant, but they will grow and they will have a wingspan, if that's even the right word to use for trees. What do you use? Canopy.
I'm just
of
saying
at least
that we could do
25
better.
feet.
We could do
And-
better. We could do much better.
Yes,
For the amount of
and-
money we spend, we can do much better. Spending $500,000 for swing sets and, 600 something thousand. How much is that project? 600 something thousand?
Well, I believe the trees we removed were having root problems, which were getting in the way of all the sewer water pipes and breaking them up. So we had to remove those. We had to put them in with these palm trees don't have as many roots. I mean, our experts are pretty good at this. When you do sit down and listen to them, they make sense. We've had numerous meetings in North Beach about this. I have heard there are some weeds in the median right now, but it's been raining a lot.
All right.
So it will grow. I've seen the mature version, and it will look lovely in a few
Okay.
years, just like
Okay.
A1A and Sunrise and A1A and
Okay.
the Gulf.
And so
All
let me
right.
just talk about weeds just for a second, because the Vice Mayor is correct. We have had extraordinary amount of rain, and that has caused them to grow.
And
We
everything's
also,
growing.
Now
The
that,
weeds are growing, but the trees
now
aren't.
that, right,
Trees don't like that.
and now
Trees
that
don't like the rain.
now that we don't use Roundup any longer, our effectiveness in weed control has diminished too. So just
Goats. We need goats.
keep that in mind as well when we have that discussion.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any further business of the commission?
Just one announcement before you adjourn, since I have you all here. I will not be in the city Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Tarlisha Smith will be the person as your first point of contact in the acting city manager role, and I will be back Wednesday morning of next week. So just keep that in the back of your head. Saturday,
So there'll
Sunday,
be no
Monday,
emergency
Tuesday.
meetings while you're gone then?
No emergency.
No.
He's going to Europe to check out that playground equipment
Yeah.
firsthand. Thank
Think
you, Chris.
that might be nice for Lockhart. Bring
I
that back.
am not. That's all,
Okay,
Mayor.
meeting
Thank you.
adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.